Sisi Panchatattva ki, Sisi Gauranitai ki, Šrila Prabhupada ki, Nitai Gaura Premanande.
Hare Krišna, lepo pozdravljeni vsi skupaj, dobrodošli. Prvo bi se zahvalila za tako inspirativne in čudovite bhađane. Sledi pa predavanje in sicer danes bo predaval njegova svetost Prahladananda Swami. Tema predavanja oziroma naslov je Šrila Prabhupada, naš prvotni učitelj. Tako da jaz bi ga povabila gor, če je že tukaj. Hare Krišna, Maharaj. Hare Krišna. Torej, če kdo rabi slučajno prevod, zdaj pa ne vemo, kdo ima. Oseba, ki je zadolžena za slušalke, ki bo posodila, da lahko dobite prevod, je tista punca tam, ko stoji pri oknu, tako da pri njej dobite slušalke, pa prosili, če jih lahko pa vrnete nazaj po uporabi. Tako da hvala poslušanju, hvala lepa, Hare Krišna.
Because there are two. Yes. I will.
Vishnupadaya, Krishna Pristaya Bhutale, Shimate Bhakti Swami Niti Namine. Namo Vishnupadaya, Krishna Pristaya Bhutale, Shrimate Bhakti Vedanta Swami Niti Namine. We're not in a rush. Namaste Saraswati Deve Kauravani Pracharine Nirvisesa Shunyavadi Patkadyade Satarine. Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shivasari Gaur Bhaktivinoda. Krishna Krishna Hare 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 Rama Hare Rama 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 Hare Hare. Hare Krishna 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 Hare Hare from India, my voice is not exactly up to singing. Om Agyanatvarandasya Garanjana Salakaya Chaksuramilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Shri Chaitanya Manobhishtam Savitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadamayam Dati Swapadantikam Vandeham Shri Guru Shri Yuta Padakamalam Shri Gurum Vaishnavamscha Shri Rupam Sagarjatam Sagana Raghunatam Vitam Tam Sajivam Sadvaitam Savadutam Rajana Saitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padan Sahagana Lalita Shri Visakans Vitamscha Hey Krishna Karna Sindhu Dinabando Jagapate Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostute Chinnagorangi Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Vrishabhanu Sudadevi Pranamami Hari Priye Vanchakapa Dravyascha Kripa Sindhu Vyevacha Patidanam Bhavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha Shri Krishna Chaitanya Ramanitinanda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Srivasadi Gaura Bhaktivinoda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya In presenting this topic about Srila Prabhupada as the founder Acharya and what it means to us, it's actually, in one sense, if we were self-realized, it would be a very simple topic. And since we're not so self-realized, therefore there are some complications to the presentation. I presented this twice so far this year. One was at the ILS, and the other is we have what was called the Spiritual Leadership course, which is for those who are aspiring or have been authorized or permitted to give initiation within ISKCON. They're required to take the Spiritual Leadership course. And usually it's a 4 or 5 day course, but we added an extra day, and part of that was spiritual abuse. And I did in the morning, I did Prabhupada as the founder Acharya. Now when I joined the movement in 1968, Prabhupada wasn't Prabhupada, it was Swamiji. And we didn't know exactly what Prabhupada's position was. All we knew is that that's what everyone talked about. He was the one everyone talked about because at that time we didn't have so many books about Krishna. We only had the original 3 Srimad Bhagavatams. That was it. And not all the devotees read the books, but they had a personal association with Srila Prabhupada, and that's why they came to the movement for the most part at that time. But rapidly the movement expanded, and then I think around 1970, Srila Prabhupada became Srila Prabhupada. And then later on he became the founder Acharya, and Prabhupada emphasized the fact that in all legal documents, in the buildings, it should have A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada, the founder Acharya of ISKCON. But Prabhupada didn't extensively explain what founder Acharya is. And therefore, I can't tell you the reason why he didn't extensively explain it, except that he did explain it in one sense, and that's what I'll try to explain. I'll give you a little bit about from Sarveshwara's course on the founder Acharya, how the founder Acharya, were the origins historically of it, and then something about how Prabhupada is infallible. which, whether you know it or not, is sometimes a controversy within ISKCON nowadays, with the Prabhupada when he was speaking from the Bhagavatam, then he was perfect, and otherwise he was culturally conditioned by somehow or another. How that you fit that together, I don't know. But I'll start from November 2nd, 1977. Some politicians from India, the Prime Minister from Uttar Pradesh, and another politician came to Šrila Prabhupada. Šrila Prabhupada left, I think, November 17 or something like that. So just 2 weeks before Prabhupada's disappearance. And this is, they came and they wanted to talk to Šrila Prabhupada alone, and Prabhupada agreed to it, although his caretakers weren't very enthusiastic. But somehow or another, they came and talked to Prabhupada, and afterwards, Prabhupada explained what the conversation was, and I'll read that. Prabhupada, this is what they asked him about. He said, after you, who will take the leadership? And Prabhupada, and everyone will take, all my disciples. If you want, you can take also, laughter. But if you follow, they're prepared to sacrifice everything, so they'll take the leadership. I may, one, go away, but there will be hundreds, and they'll preach. If you want, you can also become leader. We have no such thing. That here is the leader, here is leader. Anyone who follows the previous leadership, he's a leader. Indian. We have no such distinction. Indian, European. Brahmananda. They wanted an Indian to be the leader? Prabhupada, yes, laughs. Everyone, all my disciples, they're leaders. As purely as they follow, they become leader. If you want to follow, you can become a leader. You're Indian, but you don't want, I told them that. Tamil Krishna. Yes, they probably wanted to propose someone who would take over our movement. Prabhupada, yes. Leaders, all nonsense. Leader means one who has become first-class disciple. He is leader. Evam param praptam, one who is perfectly following. Our instruction is ara na kariya mane asha. You know this? What is that? Guru mukha padma vakya chite kariya aikya. Ara na kariha mane asha. Who is leader? A leader. To become leader is not very difficult, provided one is prepared to follow the instructions of a bona fide guru. That's all. Historically, that's what our leadership is. For instance, when Vidura came back after pilgrimage and he was greeted by Maharaj Yudhisthira, Maharaj Yudhisthira gave the following words, said the following thing. Bhavan vidas bhagavatas tirtha bhutak swayam vibho tirtha korvanti tirtani svantak stena kata britaha. That saints like yourself, they're verily places of pilgrimage. Bhavan vidas bhagavatas. Tirtha. Tirtha means a place where you go for pilgrimage. Tirtha korvanti tirtani, because you turn that place into a place of pilgrimage. And how do you do it? Swantak stena gata britaha, because you carry Krishna within your heart. In other words, Krishna is the factor that turns something material into something spiritual. Wherever Krishna is, that is Vrindavan. Just like Prabhupada wrote to one Gurukul student who sent him some mathematical equations that he was learning. He said that 1 + 1 = 2. So Prabhupada was very happy that his students were learning, his children were learning math. And Prabhupada wrote back to him, he said, you say that 1 + 1 = 2, and 3 + 2 = 5. But you should know that Krishna plus anywhere is equal to Vrindavan. So you should learn that formula also. In other words, we become a leader as much as we put Krishna within our heart. And Krishna enters into our heart not out of sentiment, but by sambandha, abhideya, and prayojana. Sambandha means that we accept that everything here belongs to Krishna. And abhideya means that we agree to utilize all our assets. Tad buddhyas, tad atmanas, tad nishtas, tad parayanaha, gachantya punar avritim, jnana nirduta kamasha. One's intelligence, one's mind, one's faith, one's refuge are all fixed in the Supreme. Then one becomes fully cleansed of all misgivings through complete knowledge, and thus proceeds straight on the path of liberation. In other words, completely utilizing our, whatever we have, our intelligence, our mind, and everything else in Krishna's service, that's the formula for becoming conscious of Krishna. And what do we see? Vidya Vinaya Sampane Brahmani Gavihasini Shini Chaiva Swapakecha Pandita Samadarshana. The first installment is liberation. And what is that liberation? One, Vidya Vinaya Sampane, the humble, the learned sages, the learned sages by virtue of true knowledge see with an equal vision the learned and gentle Brahmin, the cow, the dog, the elephant, and the dog eater. In other words, liberation means that as we become free from all hankering and lamentation and can see all living entities as spiritual beings accompanied by the super soul, that's liberation from the material concept of life, which will eventually help one become detached from happiness and distress, etc., and therefore be able to meditate in trance upon the Supreme Personality of Godhead. And therefore, that is called Krishna consciousness. Bhaya, sparshe, visaktatma, vindatyatmini yatsukam, sabrahma yoga yuktatma, sukam akshayam ashnute. Such a person is situated, Bhaya, sparshe, visaktatma. Such a person is not attracted to external sense objects or sense gratification, but is always in trance, enjoying the pleasure from within. In this way, the self-realized soul enjoys unlimited happiness because he concentrates on the Supreme. Whereas Krishna says, one who sees me everywhere and sees everything in me, I am never lost to him, nor is he ever lost to me. So that realization brings one to the platform of being a pure devotee of Krishna. And generally speaking, we are understanding who's on what level by how much they're absorbed in such a consciousness of Krishna and practically acting according to their consciousness. That we have to learn, according to Šrila Goswami, that the topmost devotee that everyone has to follow, doesn't matter who we are. In other words, everyone may not be the topmost devotee, and it's not expected that everyone's going to be the topmost devotee, but everyone's point of refuge, everyone's point of reference has to be the topmost devotee. And from the point of view of the topmost devotee, he's the standard, and then everyone else becomes relatively advanced according to how much they're understanding, accepting, and following the topmost devotee. That's the acharya. Now, the acharya's business is not, he knows everything. He's not omniscient like Krishna. But the topmost devotee, his subject matter that he teaches is Brahman, Paramatma, and Bhagavan. He doesn't have to explain everything. He doesn't have to explain what a great politician is. He doesn't have to explain what this Varnashram. He doesn't have to explain. His main business is not explaining Varnashram or explaining about who's going to win the next horse race, etc., etc. Now, Varnashram is a methodology, a step towards understanding Brahman, Paramatma, and Bhagavan. Therefore, it's also helpful to be able to organize society according to Varnashram, the necessity of doing it. Otherwise, if society is too chaotic, then it's very difficult to make any progress in spiritual life. But the other things, who's going to win a horse race, or what's the qualities of a good actor are, these are not necessary to explain. Nor does Krishna explain these things in Bhagavad Gita. Krishna basically explains about, we're not this body, we should take shelter of Paramatma in the heart to guide us towards Krishna, our relation with Krishna. And any devotee who's preaching, that's the message that he's trying to convey. How to take shelter of Brahman, Paramatma, and Bhagavan. Now there are different stages of understanding that. There's a stage by which one can become either a Shiksha Guru or a Diksha Guru. To become a Shiksha Guru means that, or Shiksha, one simply repeats the message of the previous acharyas and acts according to their message. Now Diksha may be a little bit more intricate in the sense that there are certain, if someone is going to become an Ashraya Guru, Ashraya, then he has to have a certain level of spiritual attainment. He should, in order to actually be an exemplary devotee, as an example for others to follow, and the instructions have to be the same instructions as coming into succession. Therefore, he must have certain qualities, and even when one is repeating Shiksha, it's important to have certain qualities also. So, I think the first thing, because time is limited, let me just explain, because, as I mentioned, when we're dealing with Prabhupada, and when we're talking about Šrila Prabhupada, we're also talking about, on the way down, every leader within ISKCON, including our own personal selves. Now, there's some concern on the part of some devotees, even within ISKCON, that Prabhupada sometimes he speaks absolutely according to the Shastra. And sometimes in other subject matters which are relative, whether we went to the moon or different political personalities or different understandings of the philosophy, then Prabhupada was, quote, socially conditioned, and therefore we should not he was not, somehow or another, he was not on the spiritual platform, which is actually quite a dangerous philosophy for our society, because who would, even if that was true, who would ever have the intelligence to figure out when someone like Prabhupada was on the spiritual platform, and when somehow or another he's talking on a relative platform? Generally speaking, devotees bring that up when they don't like what Prabhupada said. Then he's descended to the material platform because they don't like the philosophy that he's expounding. So this was raised by some devotees, luckily, as usual. Some devotees had questioned Prabhupada, because even when Prabhupada was here, devotees had doubts about who Prabhupada was, what his position was. As I mentioned before, I remember one time I was talking to Indradu Maharaj, and he was talking about different disciples he had. And one of them, he said, that came up to Indradu Maharaj and gave him a donation. And Indradu Maharaj asked him what his name was. And Indradu Maharaj said, well, Indradu Maharaj asked this devotee what your name is. And he said, Guru Maharaj, you don't know me? You don't know my name? So Indradu Maharaj said, sorry, I'm not omniscient. And the devotee said, you're not omniscient? Can I talk to you later? In other words, sometimes the devotees think that the spiritual master, because he knows Krishna, he knows everything. And sometimes it's said like that. He knows everything. But as Prabhupada would say, he knows whatever Krishna wants him to know. The spiritual master can't be God. Could you imagine if you knew everything? My God, how could you sleep at night? He knows whatever Krishna wants. I mean, how does Krishna sleep at night? He doesn't sleep. He has to stay awake the whole night. Never goes to sleep. He knows too much. He has to watch over everyone. Wow. Luckily, we're not Krishna. So they asked Prabhupada on a morning walk, Jayadvaita Swami and Satsrup Maharaj, asked him the following. Jayadvaita, they know everything and they're perfect in everything, but sometimes from our material viewpoint, we see some discrepancies, just like we think that, Prabhupada, because material viewpoint, the viewpoint is wrong, therefore you find discrepancies. Jayadvaita, we should think that we have the defect. Prabhupada, yes, Acharya is explained. Bhakti Samshanat. Chaitanya Charitamrita Adi 113. One who's preaching the call to devotional service, he's Acharya. Then why should you find any discrepancy? Jayadvaita, just we see, for instance, sometimes the Acharya may seem to forget something or not to know something. So from our point of view, if someone has forgotten, that is Prabhupada, no, then Jayadvaita, an imperfection. Prabhupada, that is not then you do not understand. Acharya is not God, omniscient. He is servant of God. His business is to preach bhakti cult. That is Acharya, Jayadvaita. And that is the perfection? Prabhupada, that is the perfection. Hare Krišna. Jayadvaita. So we have a misunderstanding about what perfection is. Prabhupada, yes, perfection is there. How he is preaching bhakti cult, that's all. And this is the quote from Adi Lila 1:13. Because he is non-different from Hari, the Supreme Lord, he is called Acharya. And because he propagates bhakti samshana, the cult of devotion, he is called Acharya. He is the Lord, and the incarnation of the Lord's devotee, therefore I take shelter of him. This is because he is non-different from Hari, the Supreme Lord, he is called Advaita. And because he propagates the cult of devotion, he is called Acharya. So that's the business, to explain we're not this body, to explain how to take shelter of Paramatma, the fact that he's there guiding us, and he's guiding us towards Krishna. That's why we're here in the Hare Krishna movement, to revive our relation with Krishna. Other things in his preaching, for instance, he may be preaching about relative things in the material world, and practically speaking, no one in this material world is completely in agreement with everything else about the relative world. So we're going to judge the Acharya by what he says according to time, place, and audience, and then disagree with what he says, and then what he says is wrong because we disagree with it, and therefore he fell from the spiritual platform because he doesn't agree with me. Or he's saying something which is socially unacceptable or politically incorrect, then we don't know what the Acharya's business is. As I pointed out before, Prabhupada was talking to one race car driver in England, and for 15 or 20 minutes he was talking about cars, race cars with him. Now Prabhupada's business was not to discuss race cars. But if he didn't discuss race cars with this particular driver, the driver would have fell asleep because he had no idea what Krishna consciousness is. It's like if you go on the street and try and deliver a book, which I have personal experience of, and try to tell people what's in the book directly, people have no idea what you're talking about. You might as well go up to them and say, "Excuse me, sir, I'm from Mars. I want to tell you something about Mars." People have no interest in Mars, and they have 99% of the people in this world have no interest in what's in the Bhagavad Gita so far. Therefore, unless you talk to them in a way that can make a relationship with them and get their interest as their friend or something like that, they won't listen to you. So if you ask people on the street a question like, "Excuse me, sir, how many children do you have?" and they say, I have 3 children, you go, wow, you got a good family there. I mean, any of you ask, what kind of work do you do? Well, I'm an IT specialist. Wow, are you a good one? In other words, become enthusiastic about what they're enthusiastic about, and then make a friend, and friends will listen to each other. In the airport, one of the most effective lines we had, when people would just walk by, because they were walking by pretty quickly, we look at people's shoes, especially cowboy boots, and we learn what kind of cowboy boot they had. And immediately when they walk by, you go, moccasin, and they'd stop immediately because you detected, you knew what kind of boot they had. And one of the signatures of a cowboy is what kind of boot he had. Immediately stop and say, hey, moccasin, hey, good to meet you. Immediately you were like a brother to him, a close friend. Only this confidential knowledge is revealed to the innermost circle. Cobra, right? Yeah, you got it. Wow. All right. Nice to meet you. Here, take the book. Sure. So Prabhupada was like that. He knew how to create a relationship with people and then introduce Brahman, at least Brahman. Rarely he got into Paramatma or Bhagavan. And sometimes he had to jump back to Varnashram. Professor Kataski at the University of Moscow, the head of the Indology department, had invited Prabhupada to come to Russia. And so Prabhupada, out of courtesy, went to visit him at the Moscow Institute. And Prabhupada tried to explain to him the difference between the body and the soul. And although he was professor of Indology, he could not understand that we're not this body. It didn't matter how many analogies and how Prabhupada presented it, he would not understand. And then Prabhupada tried to present to him the Varnashram, that we should have in society people who are clean and honest, etc. And Professor Kataski, being a communist, he thought everyone was the same and could not understand what Prabhupada was talking about. So Prabhupada didn't try to explain anything else to him. He just simply said, nice to meet you, Professor Kataski, and can you get us a taxi? And Professor Kataski said, sorry, Swamiji, I can't get you a taxi. So, anyhow, there's a limit to what we can actually present to people, what they can understand. Prabhupada didn't try to change the topic, try to introduce something else. But if you could not understand either Brahman, the fact that our body's changing, but we're not changing, and someone could not understand that there's a difference between being truthful and untruthful, being clean and being not clean, then Prabhupada didn't really have so much time for trying to explain anything else to them. In other words, generally speaking, if people cannot understand these 2 levels of philosophy, they probably wouldn't understand anything else about what we're doing. I remember one time I was in an engagement with Šrila Prabhupada at the Teachers State University in Buffalo, and at the end of the class, Prabhupada was leaving, and one person came up and asked Prabhupada, well, he told Prabhupada, he said, I chant this mantra given to us by what was his name? Maharishi. And Prabhupada said, well, what we do is we chant Hare Krišna, that's all we do. Hare Krišna. He didn't try to explain anything else. One time someone came up and told Prabhupada, my mind, how can you help my mind? And Prabhupada said, the only thing I have is the Hare Krišna mantra. In other words, Prabhupada did not try to go beyond what his capacity was, psychology. Except one time, as I mentioned, someone said, Swamiji, do you know about palmistry? And Prabhupada said, yes. And the man showed Prabhupada his hand, and Prabhupada looked at it and said, all bad. all the lines are bad, everything's bad. But Prabhupada said, if you clap your hands and chant Hare Krishna, it'll all disappear and everything will be all right. So sometimes Prabhupada would use psychology, but rarely in that case. So the point is, we have to see how, as Prabhupada said, bhakti samshana, how the Acharya is trying to distribute Krishna consciousness. In the explanation about who's qualified to be an Acharya, just or an Acharya, Prabhupada explains the exalted position of a person who's a Mahabhagavat. This is the end of the 5th text of the Nectar of Instruction. He said that one who's assimilated the entire philosophy of the Bhagavad Gita doesn't see any contradiction. He doesn't accept part of it and reject some other part. In other words, he sees Krishna everywhere. And he knows that there's no difference between Krishna and his name. When he chants Hare Krishna, then Krishna, he's personally associating not only with Krishna's name, but with his forms, with his qualities, his associates, and his pastimes. He's actually in the spiritual world when he chants Hare Krishna. And he has realized his spiritual identity. And at the same time, he has no other business than to spread Krishna consciousness around the world. His every thought, his every word, his every activity is simply to help others become conscious of Krishna. Such an exalted devotee should be accepted as a Mahabhagavat, and everything one has should be offered to him. Especially the brahmacharis, they collect money, so everything they collect should be offered such an elevated devotee. But if one is not on that platform, and he tries to imitate such a devotee on that platform, then he's sure to get into spiritual difficulty. Therefore, Srila Rupa Goswami advises us that first of all, we should understand who's on what platform of spiritual attainment. Not just to analyze, put people into a category, but so we know how to exchange our loving feelings with them, our service attitude. Because we have to see who's the Acharya and who's following the Acharya, and we have to know that on that basis, we base our body, activities of our body, our mind, and our words following such a devotee. And then in that, following that example, we know how to interact with those who are on the same level that we are, make friendship with them, walk on the same path as they are walking, revealing our minds in confidence to them with a surety that they will be confidential, and taking guidance and instruction for those who are most intimately associated with us. Because those who are very much higher than us, we don't have an opportunity always to associate with them so intimately. And those who are lower than us, not on the same level of spiritual attainment, they can't help us very much because they don't have the knowledge. But those who are most intimately associated with us, those who are our friends, who are more or less on the same level, they can tell us information that will help us advance on the spiritual platform. They can be the most helpful for our spiritual advancement. So we should know who's on what level, and then we should know our own level, and not imitate a devotee on a higher level. Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur has given us an example of how we can tell who's a Mahabhagavat by their ability to convert others into becoming a Vaishnavas. That one should not become a spiritual master unless he's attained the platform of Mahabhagavat. A neophyte devotee and an intermediate devotee can also accept disciples, but such disciples should be on the same level, and it should be understood they cannot help their disciples advance very well through their insufficient guidance. Therefore, one should accept a Mahabhagavat as one's spiritual master, an Uttama Adhikar as one's spiritual master. In other words, from my understanding, is that initiation is there. Prabhupada wanted initiation to go on, but he wanted us to recognize who the topmost devotee is within our society, or the topmost devotees, but at least Prabhupada gave has the position as the founder Acharya. So anyone who's exalted and advanced in our movement, they're advanced according to Prabhupada, as much as they've understood and followed Prabhupada's teachings. So that's open for everyone. It's not only for the Shiksha Gurus or the Diksha Gurus. Everyone can become a representative of our Acharya as much as we've understood and followed. It's open. It's not simply a designation. It's a reality of Krishna consciousness. The sun doesn't have to be designated as a sun in order to shine. The amount of light and heat the sun gives out is not according to its designation as the sun. It naturally gives out heat and light. Similarly, Prabhupada writes in the Nectar of Devotion that when one comes to the platform of Uttama Adhikari, from his heart emanates rays of love, which are as brilliant as the sun. On that platform, he's actually on the platform of Uttama Adhikari, and he's beyond any kind of material disturbance, we can say, or affection. So that's the platform we're all going towards, we're trying to go towards. There are other platforms I don't have time to explain. They're the platform of one who's qualified to give initiation. So that's a certain qualification. Basically speaking, initiation means that they've at least come to the platform of anartha nivritti. I'll just give us a few hints here. This is from Nectar of Devotion, chapter 2, I believe, about qualifications for accepting devotional service. So it's not that one has to be a Mahabhagavata to give initiation. That would be, no one, we couldn't have initiations if we were waiting for Mahabhagavata, waiting for the Messiah to come. There are very few. But there are certain qualities. Even in 1969, Prabhupada wrote to me a letter, and I sent him some money for his book fund, and he said, thank you very much for this contribution of love, that we're all servants of Krishna working under disciple succession. So please study all my books, and sometimes afterwards you'll have to help carry on the disciple succession. So there is giving initiation. Initiation means that one is introducing one to Krishna consciousness, and in our society they're introducing not only to one's other disciples. That's not our spiritual family. Our spiritual family is much broader than just those who are initiated by a certain spiritual master. It's the whole ISKCON society. That's the family. That's who we're introduced. When we give initiation, we're introducing one to the entire ISKCON family. Otherwise, we have different groups and they don't always agree with each other, but actually they don't agree with each other because ultimately they don't understand the unity within ISKCON's Krishna consciousness. That we're not, whether we agree with each other, it's not the important point. The question is whether we agree with Šrila Prabhupada and the teachings of our acharyas. That's the important thing. First of all, we have to understand what they are. And if we do, then we should all agree with each other, at least on the important things, namely Brahman, Paramatma, and Bhagavan. They're absolute. There's no question of disagreement. Whether or not we should eat chocolate or not, that's not the major point of our philosophy. You can fight on these things, but people eat chocolate and they won't eat chocolate. Some people eat white chocolate, dark chocolate. Some people won't eat chocolate, but still you can go back to Godhead if you understand Brahman, Paramatma, and Bhagavan. So this is from the second chapter of the Nectar of Devotion about qualifications for accepting devotional service. Because the spiritual master, initiating guru, at least when we ask them to chant 16 rounds, follow 4 of the principles, or worship the deities, this is not your guru who's going to initiate you in the Siddha Pranali mantras, who your eternal identity is. I remember one time I was in Mayapur, this is 1974. I was visiting one of my friends who was living in a shack near the Mayapur temple at that time, because the Mayapur temple was more or less a shack also. But I went there and he went to Radhakund, and he had discovered his spiritual identity was that of a peacock. And I was asking him, what's your sadhana? He said, well, I get up in the morning and I go, coo, meow, 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 meow. That was his sadhana. He was talking like a peacock. Anyhow, I asked him other questions, which I won't get into, but that's called Siddha Pranali, which is a bone of Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur talks about that in Harinam Chintamani. Unfortunately, there are no qualified gurus, practically speaking, to give Siddha Pranali nowadays. So our acharyas, following Bhaktivinoda Thakur, Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Prabhupada, and our Srila Prabhupada do not accept Siddha Pranali gurus in this age. But this is what the qualities of acharya are, that who can give initiation. He is very expert in the study of revealed scriptures. He's also expert in putting forward arguments in terms of those scriptures. He can very nicely present conclusions with perfect discrimination and can consider the ways of devotional service in a decisive way. He understands perfectly that the ultimate goal of life is to attain the transcendent loving service of Krishna. He knows that Krishna is the only object of worship and love. This first-class devotee is one who has strictly followed the rules and regulations under the training of a bona fide spiritual master, and has sincerely obeyed him in accord with the revealed scriptures. He is fully trained to preach and become a spiritual master himself. He never deviates from the principles of higher authority. He attains firm faith in the scriptures by understanding with all reasoning arguments. When we speak of arguments and reason, it means arguments and reason on the basis of revealed scriptures. He's not interested in dry speculative methods meant for wasting time. He has attained a mature determination in the matter of devotional service. This is Nectar of Devotion, Chapter 3, Eligibility of the Candidate for Accepting Devotional Service. And then Prabhupada writes that, So this is what Prabhupada took as the desirable minimum qualification to give initiation, Guru Ashraya. This is the platform of Nishtha, steadiness. And Prabhupada has repeated this a number of times. This is the Talmud, I can quote it, but Well, 1977, Tamal Krishna Maharaj was speaking to Srila Prabhupada about there are devotees in our society at that time who were more or less taking credit for doing some service and did not give credit to Srila Prabhupada. And Prabhupada did not appreciate that very much, because they seem to have thought that they had become special themselves without having the mercy of Prabhupada. And therefore, Tamal Krishna Maharaj pointed out to Prabhupada that actually they were prematurely trying to take the role of a guru within our society. Prabhupada said, well, actually, to become guru is not very difficult. He said, actually, I'm waiting for that. I want all my disciples to become spiritual masters. But just one simple thing, strictly follower. Not so simple. But anyhow, strictly follower. Then I'll retire completely, and then you can take up. Unfortunately, he said, my own godbrothers, after the disappearance of Srila Bhaktisiddhanta, they had some other idea. They set up their own separate institutions, but they were more or less interested in other things other than pure devotional service. And he said, the GBC, at the end of the conversation, you should make sure that my standards are kept up. That's the role of the GBC. And that our society doesn't degrade like that. Strictly follower, Prabhupada will repeat that a number of times, in different occasions, just become a strict follower, then you become qualified. Because after all, unless you're following this, strictly following the acharya, then who are you following? That's our problem. We're following so many people. But our solution is to follow the acharya. That from in '69, when Prabhupada came to Buffalo, Prabhupada, he observed us, the devotees. There was only 5 or 6 devotees in the temple. But whatever we did, Prabhupada commented upon to our temple president. And I remember we had certain mantras we used to chant, which we got even at that time from the devotees who had gone to India in '68. And we were chanting mantras like Gopala, Gopala. I won't repeat it. So, and Prabhupada heard it. He told our temple president that we should only chant mantras which are received in the simple succession. So Gopal mantra went out. Some other mantras went out, and Prabhupada at the very beginning was telling us we have to follow our acharyas in the simple succession. And Prabhupada was the founder acharya specifically because he introduced some things in the Western world, because no other acharya had gone around the world and had to deal with men and women, associating so intimately together. So Prabhupada had to make certain adjustments in order to spread Krishna consciousness. And therefore he had to take the role of the founder acharya also. But then without becoming authorized, one should not make adjustments without referring to our founder acharya. So I'll stop there. Thank you. Any questions? I hope I didn't confuse anyone too much. Yes. Go. He's right there.
Thank you for inspiring lecture. I just wanted to ask, where can we get the determination and strength to really strictly following Šrila Prabhupada and his representatives?
Visha vinivartante nirarasidehina rasavardam rasopyasya param drishva nivartate. That if we follow by engaging as Prabhupada wanted us to engage, as Prabhupada's representatives want us to engage, in devotional service with some enthusiasm, then Krishna in our heart will give us the intelligence by which we'll be able to experience the bliss of the internal energy of Krishna. And that itself is sufficient to inspire us. If we're in ecstasy and love, then we don't really need very much more to become inspired. Anything else? While Grantharaj Srimad Bhagavad Gita and Grantharaj, all the books, Ki Jai. Šrila Prabhupada, Ki Jai.
Thank you very much, Maharaj. Tako da, zdaj pa sledi še ples pred božanstvi.
Jaya Ade Devagane Arati Kore Jana Ade Devagane Nara Hare Ade Kore Samaradhula Shiva Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Srivasadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Srivasadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Jaya Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Srivasadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Jaya Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Srivasadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Jaya Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Srivasadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Srivasadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Ram Ram, Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Ram Ram, Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Ram Ram, Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Ram Ram, Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Ram Ram, Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Ram Ram, Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna, Krishna Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Ram Ram, Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Ram Ram, Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna, Krishna Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Ram Ram, Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Ram Ram, Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Ram Ram, Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Ram Ram, Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna,
Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Nita Gaura Hari Bol, Hari Bol, Hari Bol, Nita Gaura Hari Bol.
Nita Gaura Hari Bol, Hari Bol, Hari Bol, Nita Gaura Hari Bol.
Jaya Panchatattva, Jaya Panchatattva, Jaya Panchatattva, Jaya Panchatattva.
Jaya Panchatattva, Jaya Panchatattva, Jaya Panchatattva, Jaya Panchatattva.
Jaya Gaura Nitai, Gaura Nitai, Gaura Nitai, Jaya Gaura Nitai.
Jaya Gaura Nitai, Gaura Nitai, Gaura Nitai, Jaya Gaura Nitai.
Jaya Radha, Nanda Mohan Radha, Nanda Mohan Radha, Nanda Mohan Radha.
Jaya Radha, Nanda Mohan Radha, Nanda Mohan Radha,
Jaya Prabhupada, 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 Jaya Prabhupada.
Jaya Prabhupada, 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 Jaya Prabhupada.
Jaya Jaya Prabhupada, 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 Jaya Jaya Prabhupada.
Jaya Jaya Prabhupada, Prabhupada, Jaya Jaya Prabhupada.
Jayam Vishnupad Paramahamsa Brahmadacharya Asadhara Sushi Shriman His Divine Grace Shalasi Bhaktivedanta Swami Maharaj Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai ISKCON Samstavakacharya Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai Jayam Vishnupad Paramahamsa Brahmadacharya Asadhara Sushi Shriman His Divine Grace Srila Bhaktivedanta Saraswati Goswami Maharaj Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai, Anantya Koti Vaishnava Vrinda Ki Jai, Namacharya Srila Haridasa Ko Ki Jai, Shri Rup Sanatana Bhatt Raghunath, Shri Jeev Gopala Das Raghunath, Shri Goswami Guru Ki Jai, Brahmaniko Shri Krishna Chaitanya, Prabhu Nityananda, Shri Advaita Gadadhar, Shri Vatsadi Gaura Bhaktivinoda Ki Jai, Shri Radha Krishna, Gopa Gopinath, Shyamakun, Radhakun, Giri Govindam Ki Jai, Mathuradam Ki Jai, Vrindavandam Ki Jai, Mayapur Dham Ki Jai, Navadvip Dham Ki Jai, Jagannath Puri Dham Ki Jai, Ayodhya Dham Ki Jai, ISKCON Ljubljana Ki Jai, Gangamaya Ki Jai, Jamunamaya Ki Jai, Srimati Bhakti Devi Ki Jai, Srimati Tulsi Devi Ki Jai, Shri Panchatattva Ki Jai, Shri Gaura Nitai Ki Jai, Gaur Premanande, Slava Zarani Bhakti, Slava Zarani Bhakti, Slava Zarani Bhakti, Slava Shri Guru Shri Gauranti.
Namaste Narasimhaya.
Namaste Narasimhaya.
Prahladananda
Hare Krishna,
Hare Krišna, dragi gostje. Evo, zdaj se pa že približujemo koncu, tako da samo še par kratkih obvestil bi povedala. Torej, na oglasni deski si lahko pogledate, v prihodnje je napovedanih kar nekaj zanimivih gostov, tako da o tem vas bomo še obvestili. Da je danes ta Sunday Feast uspel, so zasluženi mnogi bakte, prav tako te, ki so peli danes, tako da ekipa, ki je kuhala in pripravljala presadam, pa jih bom kar nekaj naštela, torej pripravljali so zelenjavo Tamal Govinda Prabhu, Bhakta Jan, Bhakta Nenad in Bhakta Jaganata, mogoče sem še koga spustila, se opravičujem. Ja, Hare Krišna. Tako da kuhali so torej Ananda Vardhana Prabhu, Mahalakshmi Mataji, Anurada Mataji, Bhakta Vatsalanitai Prabhu, Harinam Ruchi Prabhu in Bhakta Josip. Ta ekipa bo pa prav tako ravno kar zdaj kuhno tudi pospravlja. Danes so oltar okrasili torej Bhakta Vatsalanitai Prabhu in Giridhari. Haribol! Garlande je naredila, torej Garlande je ustvarila Taralakshi Mataji, Ikebane pa Navadvipganga Mataji. Za ozvočenje je poskrbel Madhava Mishra Prabhu. Haribol! Tako da sledi pa še program Plus z Lalit Govindu Prabhujo in sicer od 19 do 20, tako da vabljeni, ni še čisto konec. Sedaj pa imamo še duhovno pojedino in molitev pred tem. Tako da, preden pa zaključimo, bi še rekla, če je kdo danes prvič slučajno, v angleščini. If somebody is first time here, Mukunda Prabhu is here. Okay. Sedaj pa še sledi presadam, duhovna pojedina, tako da prosila bi za molitev. V bistvu bomo kar skupaj zapeli, prav? Sharira vidya jal, tahekal, jive klesha sagore, taramati vati, lokamati surmati, take jitat kudina samsare, Shri Krishna Bhagavan, Gori Mari Jiva Joy, Saprasana Nilabai, Seranita Pav, Radha Krishna Gunagav, Premete Koshti Chaitanya Nitai. Hvala lepa. Tako da, evo, zdaj pa vse skupaj vabim na presadam. Hvala, da ste prišli in vabljeni še prihodnjič. Hare Krišna. Hare Krišna, samo še eno malenkost bi dodala. Danes presadam, torej duhovna pojedina ni sponzorirana, zaželeni so prostovoljni prispevki, tako da hvala.